what I'll then do is I'll just do a quick introduction of my other panel members. And I was planning to do so as we would move into the various sessions. So right now up front you see Michael Maerz, a friend I've had on the industry as well, has been in numerous companies around the sports betting, and he has a claim to fame of accepting the first ever online bet in 1996 with Intertops out of Antigua. So that was quite an accomplishment, and he joined Sportradar in 2015, had several posts, and is now in charge as the managing director of APAC and all countries surrounding it. So great source of knowledge, very applicable to today. That was extremely informative and a heck of an introduction into our panel. Took a little bit more time than expected in order to, we're chopping a little bit away at our time, let's say, discussing it all together. So I haven't introduced Robert Toth yet. Robert is, he joined Global Bet in 2012. He's currently managing the various aspects of the business, development, the project coordination, and the account management. He has an extensive knowledge base of the industry. So welcome, Robert, as well. Michael, I already introduced you. Let me start with you, Michael. You're very much Asia-based. Robert is Swiss-based. Michael, you're in the heat of, let's say, the Philippines, in the heart of the Philippines, in the heart of, let's say, where a lot of things are happening today. Let's talk a little bit about what is actually happening and how is that going to impact? COVID has impacted the Philippines greatly. It has impacted the whole, let's say, POGO infrastructure. And I'm very, very interested to hear some specifics around that and what you think the conclusions are, and take some of the considerations with you that Warwick made on, let's say, what the impact is going to be with China's latest announcement.
Yeah, thank you, Harmen, for the introduction earlier. Very happy to be here. Great presentation, Warwick. I think there's a few points that we need to touch on, in particular with regards to the US and land-based. But here in the Philippines, look, I'm officially based in Gibraltar, but due to my role, I commute, excuse me, a lot to Manila, and I have been stuck here since February. So I am part and parcel of the lockdown. Sportradar hasn't reopened the office yet. I think our biggest concern is transportation, with all the jeepneys and buses and generally public transport. POGOs have, I think, reopened their offices, but only with 30% capacity. And what happens if one building, and I'm not talking about an office, I'm talking about an entire office building and a tower, if there's one COVID case, the entire building is being shut down and cleaned for 2 days. So everybody has to move out, come back, and it's logistically, it's pretty much a nightmare.
Right. And generally, with, well, let's say, the latest reactions of Duterte's approach towards, let's say, the POCO licensing, the increased taxation, which is way out of, let's say, normality, or something that even can remotely be adhered to, and obviously that has a consequence for people wanting to leave or have left, and let's say what that means to the Philippines.
Yeah, the proposed tax is 5% on turnover. It's actually not dissimilar to what happened in France when they introduced the tax. That was, I think, a total of 8.9% on turnover. Obviously drove a lot of business underground, and only the big boys at the end of the day survived. And I think the same is gonna happen here. However, you will see operators go elsewhere. It happened before with Cambodia. It will happen again with Taiwan, I guess. You will see a lot of operators move there. And then there's rumors that Malaysia is considering opening up for online gaming operators. So that could be a move as well, yeah.
Well, it's pretty much the only one that's even remotely positive about doing that. Yeah. Right now, when you look at the negative side, it's the Philippines that's clamping down, it's Cambodia that has been clamping down. And it obviously is happening in Taiwan. The number of arrests in China are unbelievable. There's no official news around it, but many people get arrested for being somewhat involved in the industry. And obviously with the announcements today, as Warwick already said, it becomes a criminal act. If that happens, then that's the beginning of the end for anybody to be really comfortable in being in this space. So what does that mean for, let's say, the sports betting in general? Asia has always been the largest punter, let's say, all around, right? So if I ask you that question, Warwick, what do you feel from a total, let's say, income perspective? How is that going to develop? Is just everybody going to move, and let's say all is going to continue as is, and you see a V-shape upside? Because I'm personally a lot more negative about it, and see it as more of a threat than as a gain at this stage, until, as you said, things slowly get sorted out over time. Sorry, you're on mute.
On mute. Sorry.
Thank you.
I think there's significant pent-up demand, and when things start to get back to normal and things open up, in restaurants and bars, and people start to feel a sense of well-being, they've got money in their pockets and they'll spend it. There's an old economist saying, money burns a hole in people's pockets, and it's very true. And we'll see this pent-up demand, but then reality is going to click in, unfortunately. And the reality of the situation is that there will be loss of jobs, significant loss of jobs. And we're seeing it in the leisure and hospitality industry already. We're seeing it even at Rolls-Royce, that supplies the aero engines to the airlines. We've seen it at Boeing. Massive loss of jobs going to take place. And I think that that is going to have a significant effect. And in many respects, this crisis has the making of being worse than the 2008-2009 crisis.
I think you're completely correct. Yeah.
Because the 2008-9 crisis didn't really affect Asia, didn't affect Africa, didn't really affect Latin America.
It didn't stop a lot of things, right? It changed things. It made people, move around and, let's say, had to take other measures, but it didn't stop things. I mean, now so many things we just can't do.
I know.
So Robert,
and the whole world is affected rather than continents.
Absolutely. But I mean, lockdowns of countries, we've never ever seen that before. That has major ramifications. Robert, you have been active in Asia with your products quite a bit. What do you see amongst your customers? Do you see that, let's say, they're talking about the fact that they're not doing as well, or what are the measures that they're taking, or somehow, what do you feel are some of the longer term implications of COVID?
Hi, thank you. What we noticed starting from beginning of the year, when the whole situation in Wuhan started, all our land-based operations were slowly going down the drain. On the other hand, everything that is online doubled or grew even more in revenue, because most of the people they chose to play virtual sports online. So this is the first thing that we noticed, that the revenues steadily started growing from the beginning of the year when it comes to online betting. Other than that, when the lockdown happened, because of the lack of normal sports, virtual sports was a very good alternative. It was something that any operator needed to have in their operations, and a lot of operators realized this very quickly. So we had a huge number of requests for integrations, and my team did a great job. All of them being in lockdown, but they still managed to deliver and to make every customer happy. So these were the main things that changed because of COVID for us.
Right. And Michael, you guys came up with some really interesting products, right?
Yeah, Bip will speak about that a little bit in more detail later on with his presentation, but I can only second what Robert just said in terms of virtuals. It went absolutely through the roof, in particular in March, May, all the way until June, July, when real sports came back. Esports was another one, and I'm not talking about the typical esports in terms of League of Legends, etc. I'm talking about FIFA. So we very quickly got our traders to model FIFA games, and that was probably after virtuals the second most successful product, as well as table tennis, where we partnered with a company in the Ukraine who had very strict COVID measures, but managed to organize, I think, 4,000 table tennis matches.
4,000, wow.
A month, yes.
Wow.
So that
impressive.
basically, you know, was sort of our rescue package that we managed to offer to our customers and partners, and in turn, their customers.
And if you think of a game like that, and you know, table tennis, 2 people, is it 2 people or 4 people? Because obviously you can.
It was 2.
2, okay, so
Yeah.
2 people, no match fixing, etc. Because you guys are very strict on that, so you try to make sure that nobody knew too much, right?
Correct.
Or
Correct.
where the bets went, or whatever the case might be, or you know how you handled it. It was men, women, both.
I think it was men only. They were contained to one hotel, were shuttled to the event separately, had 2 separate entrances, and then just battled it out. So
well, I just want to compliment you with that. I think that was a great, let's say, way of coming up with something, you know, that it was a bit like the foot and mouth disease, right, Warwick, in the past in England, when virtual sports, you know, weren't existing at all, and then suddenly it was there, focused around the horse races, right? Because there were no real horse races.
Yeah, well, this is the most creative industry on earth. We have lots of problems with government. We have lots of problems with taxation and stuff, and we work through it. And, you know, I remember during the great freeze up, I think it was 1978, 79, I brought South African racing to the UK. And there was no television then, it was just audio commentary. And betting on numbers, that happened during some recession. I think the Irish invented it. They started it, betting on the Irish lottery. The Brits copied it. It's a major product now. But during this pandemic, I was approached by a boxing promoter in the US who wanted to put what he called boxing in the dark. In the dark meaning no audience, so 2 boxes, and it would become a betting meeting. And I almost got it going, you know. We're almost there. We had the fighters, we had the approval. They'd all been COVID-19 tested and everything. We had approval from the state of Oklahoma to put it on. And then, of course, the horse racing started, the soccer started again, and there was less appetite on the part of the gambling companies. But at the time, we were talking to William Hill, we were talking to Paddy Power, you know.
Right.
We were going to put 8 matches on. So if anyone's ever interested in that.
Right. But based on what you said, Michael, they should do it, right? Are you going to continue with the table tennis, or are you going to stop it?
We will certainly continue with FIFA. We have ramped up virtuals, and we will continue with the table tennis as well. It's a matter of resources at the moment, right? As I said before, the office in Manila is still closed. And so it's just a matter of getting the trading resources back in, because for some of them it's difficult to work from home. So we have managed, you know, our best effort with regards to the additional content, but now with real sports starting back up again, it becomes a question as to, you know, what is really the demand for.
Yeah, excellent. So we can really see, you know, some innovations coming, you know, after, let's say, you know, the new normal happens, etc. But I'm afraid that we're going to be in this for, you know, quite a long time, etc. I you know, personally have backed a company called Tento in order to do, you know, a total solution for, you know, testing and health wallets, etc. I believe that in the future we carry 2 passports, a health passport and our passport, you know, to cross borders, etc. Because, you know, I think the cost of shutting down is far higher than, you know, trying to get people to basically accept it. But it takes time, like anything else. Going back to the Philippines and going back to Duterte. Duterte has always, I mean, he started anti-gaming. Then he allowed a few things. Then he was pro again. First he was against, then he was pro. Then he basically says, okay, I'm going to allow this to happen, etc. Told China, no, we're going to continue with it, etc. At the same token, he takes support from China. And now we see a situation whereby he is basically, or at least Pakor is now saying that they're going to allow people within the country to place internet bets. And, to be a bit more favorable towards that regime, as most countries have gone through, right? Because if you look at the evolution of iGaming, it would always establish yourself in an area of the world where you beam out and not really focus on the local population, like it all started in the Caribbean and Costa Rica and many other areas of the world, etc. It beamed it out, then it took all the money in. Then obviously a lot of people said, hey, listen, especially in Europe, led by the UK, let's have our own regulations and let's make sure that it stays within country. UK did a very good job. Then the rest of Europe followed. Now pretty much every European country almost is on the bandwagon and has its own internal regulations, etc. Are we going to see this now happening in Asia, whereby the Philippines could lead this, and then we'll see it in other countries, as Warwick suggested that in 10 years' time? I tend to agree with him that I believe China will also approve it in the long run. What's your outlook, Michael? And then I'll go around because I'm very interested in the further thinking of the rest of the panel members.
I think if you look at what happened in Europe, right, at the time, France, Spain, Italy, I think was actually the first one outside of the UK to regulate.
Yeah.
All the operators were like, we prefer .com, but at the end of the day, it's actually good, right? And it's also good for the players in terms of KYC, compliance, etc. And so it has to happen in China. Whether or not it will happen in the Philippines, I don't know. There's only Mega Sports World at the moment that does take bets from local Filipinos. There might be some .com operators who illegally offer it here, but typically when you have a license in a country, you don't offer it to the local population. I hope it's going to be regulated at some point.
Yeah. Warwick, you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, countries that are not regulated will eventually do so. My concern going forward is the countries that have regulated gambling are putting too much of a burden on the operators with the regulation. They're making the business less profitable than it should be. They're getting less return on their capital employed. And I get a lot of inquiries these days from people that want to set up an internet gambling website, but they want a license in Curacao, and where the regulations are a lot more relaxed. In fact, they hardly exist. And I say to them, well, what is your target market? And they say, well, France for casino, UK for sports betting. And basically, they're not licensing in those countries, so they're operating illegally. And this is a growing trend, and it's a trend that the authorities in the respective European EU countries should be concerned about. And if you overtax and you over-regulate, you will drive it underground, just as we see in Asia. And that is, that's lose-lose for everybody.
Right. I mean, right now being where we are, and the fact that we have a lot of sports betting, that has taken place throughout Asia, that still takes place throughout Asia, that basically goes and is underground. China clamping down on, let's say, facilitating the banking, facilitating that, it becomes far more difficult to move money in and out. It has always been, quite difficult in a number of countries, from India to Thailand to other countries, etc., where it wasn't as easy to move the money. I think, the whole issue will be to, for governments obviously having a lack of money and being so far in debt, that something needs to happen. How can we, basically see this evolve more, let's say, effectively? Because as you said, the industry is very creative. We're very innovative, but we don't work together. My issue about the industry has always been that we're probably the largest, most separate industry in the world with the amount of money that we handle, right? Normally you have associations, you have let's say, representations of different groups, you know, that talk to one another, etc., that have better arrangements with government in order to basically align our interests.
Well, that's changing in the UK, though, isn't it? Because you've got the betting
Right.
council in the UK that has
Right.
brought together the online, the offline, the casino operators, the land-based casino operators. That they realise that knocking a hole out of each other every year is not getting them anywhere. You know, the government, you know, that one of them falls out of favour with government. The government just doesn't pick on that one; it picks on everybody. And so they've learned that coming together is a better policy, as you rightly say, and that is the way forward. But you're not going to get
international. Yeah,
you're not going to get a huge international organisation, but
right.
you could have an umbrella organisation on top of that,
Right.
where you pull in the American Gaming Association, the Betting Council in the UK, the European Betting Association. They should all at least once a year get together and agree what they can agree on.
Exactly.
That would be a start.
Yeah, exactly. I believe that after this, you know, just asking in general, if you would have to say 1 or 2 or 3 changes that COVID will bring, you have, you know, perfectly outlined that as to what it will bring. So let me jump to Robert and to Michael. If you say what comes out of this COVID situation, do you have any particular, let's say, opinions on the lasting effects? Michael?
I think innovation, education, lasting effects, 100%, absolutely. As Warwick said in his presentation, this is going to last years.
Right. Robert, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I believe that it contributed to a huge mindset change. A lot of companies, for instance, who never imagined their employees working from home, all of a sudden were confronted with the situation. But focusing only on the player side and on betting, a lot of sports book players who never ever touched virtual sports, for instance, all of a sudden discovered it, and also maybe casino players or slot players switched to virtual sports because of this situation. So also for them, it's a huge change in mentality. Normally virtual sports were reserved for, let's say, more younger generation, but we notice the age groups completely changed.
Right. So are we going to see, let's say, virtual sports and esports finding its way together? Is there any thought process around that?
I believe esports has a massive potential to do this. We're talking about a $1 billion market in 2020. So it's definitely something that will not stop. And China is one of the biggest markets when it comes to esports. It's also something that targets younger audiences, and we should not forget that these are the future gamblers. So if we focus on virtual sports and esports, we're definitely doing a step towards the future, positive one.
Right, right. So just to round it up quickly.
Esports,
yeah, Michael?
You're talking about League of Legends and Counter-Strike and Toth, right?
Yeah, we all know that, you know, let's say the publishers will never allow that, but, you know, you can have knockoffs, right? You can have similar type of, so at least people see, let's say, something that they're somewhat familiar with and place a bet on it like they do on the virtual sports, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. I'd imagine that's the next phase of, you know, the virtual sports going into areas where it hasn't been active yet.
Virtualizing esports, yeah.
Yeah. It's already virtual, but, you know, call it virtual. Okay. Thank you very much. Just the last one. I believe that, you know, let's say, we all know that, let's say, the land-based was very well structured in Asia, in the sense of that at least that had a proper licensing regime. It was very clear what the regulations were. We also know that during COVID, iGaming was actually the only area that really profited from this, because obviously everything else was shut down. Can we see, let's say, some way that the land-based are going to go more online, or is there more of a, let's say, conversation at this stage? Because so far it has always been very difficult to put, there was an iron wall between, let's say, iGaming operators and the especially larger regulated land-based operators. And anything there? Any of you want to comment on that? Because I basically want to close with this before we go into the focus groups and then into the question and answer session, because where I believe Asia has a strength is in its sizable, let's say, land-based operators and the money that floats around them in order them to push, you know, let's say more into the iGaming. Will we see some of that?
Yeah, it's only my personal opinion, right? I think it can only be done through M&A. So I don't think any of the big players in, say, Macau can launch or has the ability to launch an online gaming platform and just make it happen like that. I think they need to buy in the expertise. They need to buy in probably a player base already, and then convert their land-based players onto the online platform. And I think that can only happen through M&A.
Robert?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we definitely see the switch towards online, and a lot of players who were strictly land-based players discovered that they can have the same level of excitement online. Obviously, the social factor is missing, but thanks to technology, and as my colleague already said, technologies and innovation, these are two very important bits in this industry of ours. Because of technology, we can also close this gap. There are certain virtual reality products already on the market where you can also introduce this social element. So you basically show to your customers that there's no need to go to a land-based shop, no need to go to a casino. They can have exactly the same experience, if not a better one, with a virtual reality headset.
Okay, thank you. Warwick, last word.
What was the question?
Well, I'm Asia being so strong on the land-based, and let's say pushing more into the iGaming, you know, creating a bit of a wave that the regulators are going to listen to, because effectively, I believe money talks.
Well, the start and ending point is the law, and if the law allows it, then it will happen. Having said that, it's rather ironic that you have this opening up in the United States, and yet Las Vegas Sands and Wynn are still reluctant to have an internet solution. MGM have gone with it, Caesars have gone with it, all the other smaller casino chains have gone with it, and yet we're still not seeing the two major land-based companies go with it. But they will have to at some point in the future. And as far as Asia is concerned, I think there would be a willingness for all of the operators to engage with e-gaming if the law allowed it. But they can't do it outside the law because it will jeopardize the licenses of their land-based enterprises.
Okay.
So we're stuck.
Just to leave everybody with a last thought before I move it over to Sportradar, isn't it that Wynn and Sands are a bit against it because China whispered in their ear to basically back out of it?
I don't know.
Just a train of thought, guys.
You're intelligent.
In all honesty, I like to keep on talking about this because I've worked with a number of people in China, etc. I have great respect for the nation, and for a lot of people within, and I just find it interesting to see, as you know, I predicted many years ago that China would never allow this situation to forever continue, just for as long as they wished. Clearly, we're heading the end of that. Okay, thank you very much for this panel.